Well, today we're going to have a special conversation about intelligence, and we'll be looking at it really from the perspective of casting. And with us here today, we have Brenda Kelly Grant, who is Senior Vice President of Disney Branded Television Casting. Welcome,
Yes.
Brenda.
Welcome. It's so great to be here. Thank you.
We're looking forward to this conversation. And we like to start with who you are. And maybe you can just take us through some of the great memories you have of your childhood.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I'm head of casting for Disney Branded Television. So what that entails, I oversee all of the casting for live action, animation, movies, and unscripted. And so we start with the littlest littles with Disney Junior, and then up through really big world building shows like Percy Jackson. So you asked me a little bit about me as a kid. I was the kid that completely wanted to be an actress. So everything was a big show for me. I would put on shows for my grandparents who were so kind to me and would always watch my put on shows. But I think school was actually really hard for me. So by 10th grade, I had been in 9 different schools. We moved a lot as a family. So I was constantly coming into a new school situation. I think on top of that, I probably had a little bit of dyslexia that had never been diagnosed. And at the time I grew up in school, you didn't have computers, you didn't have spell check. And so I think learning, which is a really exciting thing now, is so much more individualized and so much more accepting that people learn things in different ways.
Mm. Okay, so you've talked a little bit about living in different countries. You said 9 different schools.
Yeah, in the city. So I've lived in I've lived in, but later in college, I lived in London. But I have lived everywhere from like Hawaii to Detroit to Tucson, Denver, lots of different places.
So out of that plethora of different teachers that you had, does anyone stand out? Can you visualize one of the great teachers you had and what it was about him or her or them that made them so special?
Yeah, I would say Mr. Boyle, who I think was my freshman high school teacher. And I think he was the one who really met me and saw the potential in me. And there was another teacher, Jan McGinnis, who was absolutely incredible. And she was 7th grade, I believe. But I think what was so great about them is they saw the possibility in me. And I think when you see the possibility in an individual, it really empowers them to become who they're supposed to be. And so I was no longer the person that like maybe wasn't as great at math or was disorganized or, fill in the blank, but they were like, she's really good at, A, B, and C. So let's nurture that. And I think having a teacher, with both Miss McGinnis and Mr. Boyle, that really sort of were hands-on learning and doing and brought it into the current world was so important to me because for me, learning just textbook-wise was challenging, right? Like I think my mind would wander. I wasn't engaged, but all of a sudden you take a history lesson and you're showing, something visual from it or an artifact like I was in, like somehow connecting it to the real world. And I think that's what they really did best.
Mm.
One thing that strikes me, that teacher saw my potential, and of course that registers with what you do at Disney.
Yeah.
Your business is to find the potential and develop it.
That's right.
Is that right? Yeah.
That's absolutely right. And one of the things I'm so proud of what our department does is we look at kids as becoming. And I personally feel that you're becoming at any age. It doesn't matter if you are 6 or 96, right? Like if you always need to have that curiosity, you always need to be learning, you always need to be becoming. But in that sort of realm of the kids that I work with who are becoming, they're not going to be fully baked, if you will, right? So maybe someone's really good at acting, but they're not great at singing or dancing. I bring in professionals, my team brings in professionals to help get them to where they need to be and really just bring out the best in them, like really see that potential so they can achieve their dream. But I think what's also so great about Disney Branded Television is the other departments I work with. So for example, when we're testing an actor, they also understand that that actor is becoming. And so they're on a trajectory, they're on their journey, they're not there yet. And so to have sort of that grace, that patience, and maybe even altering some of the creative to fit with an actor that we find really interesting, that we really want to invest in, but maybe wasn't exactly right for the part.
I mean, this is such a fascinating area, and I'm trying to get my head around it. But so, if you are selecting someone,
Yeah.
Can that decision be taken by one person, or does it have to be a kind of panel or collaborative decision?
And no, it really is a collective group of people, right? We have the president of Disney branded television, Io Davis. We have the head of live action, Charlie Andrews. There is a group of incredible people coming together to see people, to look at people, as we narrow them down in the process. So as you probably know, casting is subjective, right? When we're watching somebody, everyone kind of knows what's good, what's bad. My job is really interpreting the gray area, that subjectiveness of it.
And how often, I mean, I'm imagining that
Yeah.
you don't always agree, and there must be quarrels and members of the panel who
Yeah.
feel, this isn't fair and we've lost an incredible talent because the others didn't want to go that way. Or do you find that you actually converge more often than not in your analysis?
Collectively as a group, I think we've worked a while together. So I think we have a great cadence to each other and a great respect for those opinions. But we encourage healthy debate, right? Because again, with it being subjective, I may think something is really amazing. You may think something's not really amazing. And so it's truly magic when we're all watching something and we're all in agreement. I mean, those are just really special moments where you're like, we've got the person. When I'm watching someone become that character and it's no longer, that person is sitting in front reading the sides, it's magic.
And then I guess there are moments where you realize that you didn't actually make the right decision. I mean, this seemed like the perfect, fit. And then when you get to a production, it all falls apart, or does that not really happen?
Again, because of the area that I work in, if it is not working, it's my job to figure out how it's going to work, right? And so I think you have to have that grace, because sometimes it's just blocks in front of people. There's a reason why it's not working. And so for my team and I, we really need to identify what those blocks are and push them out of the way and solve for it, rather than sort of just giving up on it and being like, okay, well, it's just not working. So we usually have pretty tight deadlines. So we got to figure out a way to make it work.
Oh, I like that. So you're coaching, you're helping them along.
Yeah,
as a
we're
whole.
championing, we're mentoring, we're coaching, really all of that, just to, hopefully get them to exactly where they need to be.
Here's an awkward question, and don't need to dwell on it, but in the process of selecting talent, you're also turning away talent.
That's right.
You're turning away people who deserve to be believed in some form.
Absolutely.
But they're not going to be part of your team. Can you just walk through, are there, beyond recognizing that reality, that only a fraction will make it into whatever the program is, how does your team interact with those youngsters, or what's your take on that?
I personally believe the right role somehow always finds the right person. But having said that, one advice that we give to actors, young or older, is that it's not about winning the role, it's about winning the room, right? Because maybe you didn't win the role, but you came in for that audition, you came in prepared, you came in who you were in this really authentic way, and we're going to remember that forever. So your role might not be this week, your role may be a week down, 5 years down, but we track people for a long time. I think that there's something really special about kid talent and knowing that they're going to go in and sometimes they'll get it and sometimes they won't get it. And how do you let go of that? And I really credit that to parents, because I don't think it's just about celebrating the wins. I think it's about celebrating the fact that you got as far as you did, right? Go out for a special dinner, do something fun because you were in the room and you made it that far and you put in the work for that. And that's so amazing. So I think that celebrating the steps instead of thinking like, I need to be the star of a show. We have people who have been with us, for 6 years in smaller roles that are now big stars, but it took a long time, right? And all of those steps. And so I think what's really important is, one, does it still bring you joy? Is it something that you like to do? And if it does, then you know this is part of the process. And much like sports, there are games that you're going to win and games that you're going to lose, but you keep going because there's something inside of you that you love so much.
Wow. Very pedagogic. I mean, we're getting straight into education, which isn't surprising because the parallel between selection and screening, talent spotting, and then performance in an educational setting, which is all sorts of problems, is quite striking. But if I may, just some statistics here. So roughly speaking, if there's a big film coming out, some Disney blockbuster, how many people are trying to get in? Would you say that before you whittle it down to whatever it is, the final 5?
Yeah. I mean, look, we have open searches at least once or twice a year. And on those searches, we receive thousands and thousands of submissions, and we watch every single tape, right? In the process for a role specifically that gets towards the testing process, it's usually for one role, like maybe 3 to 5 people at the most. And the testing process is really that last step in it. So those are the people that are really, really in contention.
So thousands. And is that global?
Yes, we do. All our searches are global.
And does it ever work the other way around where you talent spot, where you're like walking down the street and you see someone, you're like, hold on, who's this? And you go to them and say like, you need to become a movie star or something like that?
Yeah, maybe not when I'm walking down the street, but we go all around the world in terms of who we're looking for. I'm constantly, at shows, at plays. We look at a lot of the schools actually here in Los Angeles. We look at schools that are not in Los Angeles. We are constantly looking for talent. And so that may even be, Instagram, TikTok. It may be when I'm watching something, I'm not just watching the lead actor. I'm looking at the people who are secondary characters and seeing how they pop on screen, what's interesting about them. So constantly we're having general meetings with people all the time. I am in a constant state of finding talent. And I really credit that to, my boss, Sharon Klein, who oversees all of casting for Disney Entertainment, has really empowered us to go find the very best talent. And with that support, we've been able to do that.
Is it very different, the realms of Instagram or TikTok or short videos, which sort of become a phenomenon that have swamped a lot of media over the last 2 or 3 years or whatever period of time? That talent, that performance, is that seen as differing from traditional talent development that Disney has tracked and recruited from?
Look, I think great storytelling, great stories, great characters translate across everything. Yeah. So whether you're watching someone in 30 seconds or 30 minutes or an hour or 3 hours, right? Yeah. It's always going to be about those characters. It's always going to be about that storytelling, how you connect. What I love about my company, though, and what we're doing is we're always trying to exceed the expectations of an audience and meet them where they're at. So especially for young people, that could be, on those social platforms, right? But we also, it's so exciting to hear how much they appreciate something, like a Percy Jackson, like a Descendants, like a Zombies, like what that means to them, especially with the music component to it. I feel like with that tween, teen, kid demo, music means so much. Yeah. Music is usually the language that says what they want to say that maybe they're just not saying, that feeling that's able to really capture. And so I think having music in our programming is incredibly important.
But there's just the explosion of access to content creation has created many more content creators than there have ever been, and many more storytellers. And they tell there's some amazing talent out there that simply arises from the ecosystem of our social media.
I love that. I think that's so exciting. I think back to, me as a little kid, and if maybe that would have been available. If you're a content creator, to be able to do what some of these kids do just in terms of storytelling, how they're video editing, how they're putting something together, the special effects they may use, that's really incredible. It's just tools that just really amplify the industry.
Yeah, giving more access. I mean, because they're auto-producing and so getting themselves out there.
Right.
Yeah.
As opposed to the traditional model where you needed some, producer
Production
or
system,
someone a manager to have done it for you, I guess.
Right. We've come a long way from the shows I produced for my grandparents as the audience to what, kids can do now.
Okay, so talent, you're looking for this rough diamond, or maybe it's a chiseled diamond, but it's something special. You must have an opinion on what intelligence is. What's your definition of intelligence?
Ooh, okay. Intelligence. That is a wide, big question, right? To me, intelligence is creativity. But if you're really sort of zeroing in on that, I think it's the ability to look at the bigger picture and look at the connections, how it all connects. And I don't just mean how businesses connect or different ideas connect, but also people connections. I think people who can pull together the right groups, that's intelligence. I think people who are creative and can look at something that's been done the same way and can see it in a new and exciting way, in a different way, that's intelligence. I also think resilience is intelligence, and the ability to pivot is intelligence. And I feel like sometimes, especially with a lot of creative people, maybe you weren't the traditional sort of cookie cutter cut out of what a perfect student is. I definitely wasn't. But and I was thinking of this a little bit, just even in terms of AI, right? When you look at AI and there's so much information, and I look at it as this tool that you can really use in your toolbox. It's a paintbrush, right? But it's always going to sort of pull from what's already out there. And intelligence to me is seeing what's not out there. If that makes sense.
Well, that's a great summary line. Intelligence is looking to see what's not there.
Yeah.
We've had some good headlines. Another one I liked is you don't win the role, you win the room.
Yeah.
Social intelligence.
Let's just go through a transcript and extract the winners out of that. We've got
From
a
the
bunch
podcast.
of them.
Yeah. We've got a contender here. We're doing our own selection here of the best podcast. No, I'm kidding.
I love it.
No, we're not. We're not.
But you
I hope I make your list.
even if you didn't, you won the room.
Thank you. I won the room. That's all that matters.
Yeah. Okay, so you talked a little bit about curiosity, about resilience. You talked about people skills, interpersonal intelligence. What should we be doing in schools, maybe that we're not doing, or should we be doing more of, that we're already doing, to amplify this type of intelligence? What do you think a perfect school looks like?
I think in the same way I was talking about meeting our audience where they are and exceeding those expectations, I think it's also that for kids. I think it's learning that's dynamic. There could be someone who really likes to listen and read and highlight in their book or, use their computer in that way. And there's going to be somebody who needs to be a visual and learner who needs to just see things like how it's done, touch it, feel it, right? So I think individualized learning is really important. And I understand that's really hard in classrooms, right, when you have a lot of kids. But I think there's touch points that sort of carry through in terms of connecting with different types of learners. So I think that's important. I think it's important to have real world experience. These kids are so smart, right? So it's not just textbook, it's bringing in the real world. I think curiosity is critical to everything. Like, how do we teach our kids to be curious? How do we teach kids to ask why? How do we teach kids to understand the source of where the information is coming from? All really important as well, too, right? I think when you have those things, you create dynamic classrooms that really set kids up for the future.
There's a lot going on there.
There's a lot to process.
You sound like an educator.
Oh, really?
You are an educator, actually.
Brenda is an educator, but she's senior vice president, head of casting for Disney Television, Disney branded television. And I don't see the word educator, and I don't conceptualize the word educator in that description. But I hear the themes and the principles of education and pedagogy in everything you're saying.
Everything.
And it's very interesting to see that as it comes into this very human process of casting.
I think that probably comes from the leadership portion of my job. I have a team that I have to continue to keep engaged and meet them where they are and get them to where they need to be, right? And so I think about those things a lot, what inspires people. I want to encourage whoever's on my team to be able to stand in their own truth. They're hired in these jobs to be able to bring their experience, to bring their opinions to the table. And so I really want to champion that. I think that that's really big. And I want them to question things and, bring their hole puncher and punch holes in our ideas and be like, this would work because of this, or maybe it doesn't work and we start again. But I want those ideas to continually be flowing. I want people to look at situations in different ways, because just for me personally, and maybe this is because I've moved so much, I don't like when things don't change. I don't like when things don't evolve, or you hear, well, we've done it this way, so it should be fine. I really want to smash those sort of process and procedures and see how we can do it better, how it's more efficient, how it makes more of an impact. So I'm constantly doing that every day at work.
I mean, something that Eric and I, are quite passionate about, it's reforming assessment. Because here's the problem. We all know that creativity is important, critical thinking. But the conditions under which those are tested, which are excessively narrow and high stakes at the end of high school, are not, to use sort of educational jargon, ecologically valid. So what you're producing is children who can deal with high stress tests more than really show curiosity or critical thinking, or better still, are able to manifest their critical thinking and their creativity in unnaturally stressed conditions. Now, if we just transpose that to casting, don't you think that the whole world of the audition is so stressful that it's sort of bearing down on young people and actually squeezing out a lot of natural talent? And the ones that will sift through are the ones that can cope with that spotlight. And you might say, well, that's what they have to get used to anyway. But I've always wondered if the audition couldn't be revolutionized and there might not be a more authentic way of spotting talent. I don't know what it would be, but
I think the pandemic actually changed the way that we look at talent. It made it more accessible, and it gave actors the time to do what they do and do it best. And what I'm talking about is the self-tapes. So before you had to come in a room and there's a lot of people watching you do your thing. And now, for at least in the beginning stages, you get to put on tape what you're proud of, what you feel good about. And you don't need to be in LA. You can be anywhere in the world. So I love that it's created that access and accessibility. And I don't think it's different. I watch my son in a soccer game, for example, and he puts so much pressure on himself, right? And when you're putting that much pressure, usually things don't go well because you're in your head, right? And so I don't think, unfortunately, in the world we live in, that there's not pressure on kids in all different things, right? Whether it's sports or academics or acting or gymnastics or whatever it is, because I think we live in a very fast world. And I think that if kids are on social media or what they're seeing a lot of success, but maybe what they're not seeing is the path before the success when it wasn't there yet and what it took to go into that. So I think there's a lot of pressure to feel like, well, by the time I'm 21, I should be a trillionaire and completely, have everything going for me. And again, we're in a process of becoming, and you may be in a really great position at 20, or you may be in a really great position at 60 where things really hit for you in the way that they're supposed to. So I think that resilience of instilling that in kids from the beginning, that's what's so important, because the world will only continue to evolve and change at a faster pace. And so I think whatever coping mechanisms that we can help kids with, and I've noticed that with LILA in particular, of, how do you take a deep breath, right? Like, how do you just take a deep breath and let it out and, center yourself? Do you need to stand up? Do you need to walk around? What is it that you need to do to take care of you? I think being able to instill that in kids so they can advocate for themselves, especially as they become adults, is so important.
I think one thing that strikes me, another winning line or principle that you've shared relates to this, and that is when you're working with talent that comes in, they've got the role, and you're working with them, you're also mindful that they are changing all the time, and that there's something very powerful about that ethos of acknowledging that, embracing that as a Disney team, that who you're working with today is not who they'll be in a month or the next season. That's very powerful, and I think it's very consistent with everything you're saying about what you see at LILA.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I think of, again, I have two kids at LILA, one in first grade and the other one in sixth grade. But my sixth graders started kindergarten during the pandemic. And I look at that and, he experienced the fires this past year. And I'm like, this kid is going to be so resilient someday when you look at like that thing. But can you imagine starting kindergarten online in another language as well, and not being able to have that connection with human beings for a pretty significant amount of time, right? Everything was just on a screen. And so I feel like when kids first came back from that, they were kind of a mess, to be honest. They didn't know how to interact with each other.
Absolutely.
There were a lot of issues. And I so appreciate the school for the support that was put around these kids to catch them up and get them to where they need to be, learn how to connect with each other, learn how to problem solve, right? Because it's different when you have a parent sitting in the other room listening all day long to what their kid's doing in school to when they start navigating it themselves and to really having to solve for that. But I think it's especially for those kindergartners, and I'm watching these sixth graders now just turn into such incredible human beings, right?
That's really interesting.
It's so interesting because we were always talking about the
Yeah.
deficit that was created educationally by
Yeah.
COVID, but here you're actually talking about some of the resilience
Yeah,
And,
that built up.
absolutely.
and we're just now coming to a time where we can see what happened multiple years later.
Right.
So
And there's a lot of that. And I think there were, I can only speak for LILA because that's where my kids are, but in the school system of LILA, there were so many things put in place to support kids, whether it was counseling, whether, it was community sort of like, and I'm talking about school community, that support to really bring kids back together to understand empathy, to understand how to work together.
Brenda, one last question for you. So there are millions of children out there who, they go to the movies and they must be thinking, to me, it's almost universal, like, wow, I'd love to be a star. I mean, it just seems so kind of intuitive. Maybe I'm wrong, but what advice do you have for them? What questions should they be asking themselves, and what should they be doing if they've got that drive in them?
Yeah. So this is for anything. If whatever it is that you want to do, learn your craft, right?
Yeah.
Do something every single day that, contributes towards that craft and that learning. And it doesn't take money. Most of us have an iPhone or a phone, right, that you can put yourself on camera, that you can create something, that you can take, a scene and practice it. I think that's really big. Learn your craft. You wouldn't have somebody in a professional, like, football team all of a sudden going out on the field after not practicing. So I think that's really important. I think having the joy of what you do is also really important. And it's bigger than the fame. It's because you need to do this. There's something inside of you that loves that connection with an audience, that loves to bring a character to life. And I would always ask myself, because it's a hard career, right? Like, so make sure you really, really love it. And then I say, go for it and believe in yourself. And you're going to hear a lot of voices, and this is for any kids. You're going to hear a lot of naysayers throughout, your growing up time and into adulthood. If something matters to you, then just keep your eye on the ball and, stay in your lane in terms of like going towards your goal, and don't listen to the noise, because there's something inside you guiding you to where you're supposed to be.
Mastery, joy, love, self-belief. Wow, that's powerful.
And you never know. I, again, failed actress, right? I would not cast me, but I get to do this incredible job that I'm so grateful for. I have the incredible joy every single day of watching someone in front of me who is kind enough to, deliver their talent, to bring a character to life. And I will never take that for granted. Like, I get to see somebody that sometimes you're in a room and you're like, this person is going to sell out an arena someday with their voice, right? So it's an incredible privilege. And, I just really encourage someone, if you have a dream, just go for it.
Brenda, it's been an inspiration. Thank you for being here today and for sharing all of this with us.
Absolutely. It was such a joy to talk to you both.
Brenda, thank you.
Thank you.